Hello friends! We are making very good progress with our database design and implementation. We have come up with initial design for our to-do list application. We have decided on the tables we want. We have designed and created all the tables we need, the columns in those tables, and even examples of the data that those columns will hold. However, there is something missing though, and that's the relationship between records in the tables. Actually, we have established that there is some kind of relationship or link between records in these different tables, but we never discussed what those lines mean. So in this video, we are going to discuss relationships between tables, how we can reflect a relationship between different table records that are saved in our database to understand what is going on here. Let me show you once again the first mockup that we had in the design lesson. We said with our application, users, beside their tasks, they can also create their own categories and priorities. But in this particular mockup, we're going to look at tasks of one user. These tasks that you see on this page are all owned by this very particular user. So inside of our database, we need to set up some kind of relationship. We need some data somewhere that says these different tasks belong to this user. Okay, but let's first discuss different kinds of database relationships, as we need to understand them to make this connection between tables, between tasks, between user. Actually, there are four kinds of relationships in the database. One-to-many, many-to-one, one-to-one, and many-to-many relationship. After we understand these relationships, we will then see how we actually implement each of these inside of our database. Okay, coming back to this mockup. What we have here is user Astrid logged in and he sees all the tasks belong to him. Cool, let's take a look at a diagram and understand the relationship between a user and tasks, and then how we might describe that in the world of Postgres. So what we have got here, we have a user called Astrid here on the left hand side, and this user owns many different tasks. So one user owns many tasks. That's why we would refer to this kind of relationship as one-to-many relationship. So the first kind of relationship that we are going to look at is a one-to-many relationship. These lines with arrows are showing kind of ownership. A user has many tasks. In database design terms, a user has a one-to-many relationship with tasks. Now the definition of one-to-many relationship. A one-to-many relationship exists between two records if a record in one of the tables can be associated with multiple records in the other table. Each record in the second table can only be associated with one record in the first table. So in this particular case, a task belongs to one user. A user has or can have many tasks. I think that's clear for you. There's another kind of relationship that's really just the same one, but the opposite. So if we look at the relationship from the perspective of task, then we could say that a lot of different tasks belong to one user, or a single task has one user. We would refer to this as a many-to-one relationship. So many different tasks belong to one single user. I want you to notice right away that these two relationships we have looked at, one-to-many and many-to-one, they are the exact opposite of each other. And it really depends upon which perspective you are looking at this relationship from. So if you're looking at this from the perspective of a user, it is a one-to-many relationship. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of a task, it is a many-to-one relationship. At the beginning, it may look a little bit confusing, but I will give you more real-world examples to understand what is going on with one-to-many and many-to-one relationship. All right, let me show you another mockup here very quickly. So we extended the categorize sidebar, and here you see also a list of categories on this page. As you know, the users of our application can categorize their tasks. Here you can see for the family category, we have 2 tasks. For religion, we have 1, and nothing for travel. In our system, a task can be under only one category. So let's try to imagine how we might represent this relationship and how we might describe it with the terms of one-to-many and many-to-one. Okay, let's focus on the family category and take a look at a diagram here. So we have a category, in our example, family category, and the category can have many different tasks tied to it. Under category family, we had task 1, visit parents, task 2, visit Rome. Oh, probably the parents are in Rome. So one category has multiple tasks. That is a sign of a one-to-many relationship from the perspective of the category. Or we can look from the perspective of tasks and say many different tasks belong to one category, or a task has one category, and refer to this as a many-to-one relationship. These two relationships are used a lot, and even in our database we have it between different tables. Look at the priority and the task tables. One priority can be assigned to multiple tasks. Say we have a priority called high, so multiple tasks can have high priority. So the next one is a user can create or can have multiple categories. So multiple different categories belong to a single user. And also a user can add or can have multiple different priorities. Or we can say different priorities can belong to a user, a single user. You see, we have this relationship almost with all our tables. I think at this point, more or less, you understood one-to-many and many-to-one relationships. And now we see how to implement these relationships. So let's focus on a user and category relationships first, and then we will see the rest. Let's take a look at the slide that I prepared for you. I've just added a couple of users and some category that we had on the mockups. So, as we saw in the mockup, we had a user Astrid here, and this user had these three categories. So we are going to figure out how we can relate these categories and a user using one-to-many or many-to-one kind of relationship. Here, the knowledge that you gained in the last lesson about constraints is going to help a lot. So in the last lesson, we added primary keys to all tables that we have. I think you remember that. We said a primary key constraint is a unique identifier for a row of data. We also said often a unique identificator number, such as an ID number, serves as a primary key in a table. It is a good practice to add a primary key to every table, so every single table you ever make is going to have a primary key. But when it comes to setting up relationships between tables, between two different records, being able to uniquely identify a row of data in a table via the table's primary key column is only half of the story. The other half of this story is the primary key's friend, the foreign key. A foreign key is a column or a group of columns in the table that reference the primary key of another table. In other words, foreign key associates a row in one table to a row in another table. The goal of a foreign key is to somehow relate a record in one table to some record in another table or even the same table. So we need to add a foreign key column here inside the category table to connect it with user table or user info table as we called it. We are going to see how to add this reference column using pgadmin in a second, but for now let me set up a relationship on this slide. We are going to call this foreign key column user_ID, and inside of this column we are going to store the ID of the user that this particular category belongs to. So in our case, we saw in the mockups that these three categories belong to user Astrid. These records somehow relate to the user with ID 1. And if you look at inside the user info table, we will see that there is a user with ID 1 and its username is Astrid. So all these three categories, family, religion, travel, they have user ID 1, and the user with ID 1 in user info table is Astrid. So the user ID column of the category table, which is a foreign key, references the ID column of the user table. So we have now formed a relationship. We are somehow related these three categories right here to the user with ID 1 right there. That is how we're going to implement a one-to-many and a many-to-one kind of relationship. So now let's go to pgadmin and set up this relationship. And now let's go to do this database, go to to-do schema, and here we're going to find our table called category. To add a foreign key, we have to first add a new column. We said we are going to call it user underscore ID, and its data type going to be big int. Cool. And now we are going to move to the constraint section. And here we have this foreign key. To add the foreign key, we're going to click on this little plus, and then we're going to go to the edit row. Okay, and now we have to go to the columns section. Okay, the local column is going to be the user ID that we have just added, and the reference table is going to be user info, because we said that this user ID going to reference to ID of the user info table. And the last thing is we have to click on this add button. Great. Once we did so, we can save it and we can go to the category and refresh. Cool. Here you go. We have this user ID column here, and here we have this new constraint, foreign key constraint. Now, with the help of the foreign key constraint, we maintain the referential integrity of data between the tables. Postgres won't allow you to add a value to the foreign key column of a table if the primary key column of the table it is referencing does not already contain that value. Let's see an example. Let's go to view data, all rows. Cool. Now we see this foreign key. We said that all these three categories belong to user Astrid. Let's view data in all rows as well, just to check that the ID of the username, the user Astrid, is 1. So we're gonna add 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here, and store. So it means that all these three categories relate or belong to user with ID 1, that is Astrid here. Okay, if we try to, for example, add here like 3 and try to save it, we are going to get this error. It violates foreign key constraint because we do not have any user with ID 3 in user info table. By using the relationship that we just set up with the help of foreign key, in the future lesson we ask Postgres, for example, to take a look at our category table and all the user ID values inside there and give us all the categories with the user ID 1. And this way we will get all the different categories that are associated with this user right here. And that's the idea. And now let's say that this user Behruz logged into our application and also created its own categories here. So let's say, let me change it back to 1 here. And let's say that this user Behruz added a category called sport and then ID 4. And then to relate this category sport with the user Behruz, we will look at this ID, it is 2, and then we'll go back to the category table. We will set this to 2. So, and save it. So we just connected this sport category with the user with ID 2 here, that is Behruz. I think you got the idea here, and you are ready to take a look at the table with multiple foreign keys. Yeah, a table can have multiple foreign keys depending on its relationships with other tables. A good example of a table with multiple foreign keys is a task table. We have this task table over here. And now let's take a look at the diagram. I know we already went through this, but one more time, very quickly. One user can have multiple tasks. A category has multiple tasks. Or we can say multiple different tasks can be associated with a single category, so many-to-one relationship. The same with the priorities. We can assign multiple tasks with a single priority, or one priority can be assigned to multiple tasks. So one-to-many relationship. One-to-many relationship or many-to-one, again, as we said, from which perspective we look at. Now let's jump into pgadmin again and add all these foreign keys. Now let's right click on task table, go to properties, go to the columns, and we said that we're going to add 3 foreign keys. Let's start off by adding 3 columns. 1, 2, 3, great. And let's user ID here, and it is going to be big int. The second one we said category underscore ID here. It is big int again. And the last one is priority underscore ID here. Let's go and set the data type here. Great. And now let's move to the constraints section and click on foreign key. Okay, the first one is going to be from user ID. As a local column, we're going to select user ID and we reference to the table user info ID column. Great. And we click on this add button. The first one, the first foreign key, we have it. Now let's go again here and click on this plus, go here, and we are gonna click on this edit row here again and go to the columns. We set category to, we'll go this time we're gonna reference to ID of the category. Great. And we will add it. And the third one is going to be, let's click add row again and go to here again. And the third one is we are going to select here priority ID and we will reference to table priority ID here, priority here and the ID here. Cool. And we will add one more time here and great. We are going to save it. Right click here on the table and refresh. We are going to see all the newly added columns here and these 3 foreign keys right here. Great. Now let's take a look at the last table. It is priority table. Let's go here, go to the properties, and then let's go to column section. And here we're going to add user ID. And the type is big int. And now we will go to the constraints section. And here we're going to go to the set foreign key section, add a row, and to the columns, user ID, reference table is user info table, and then the primary key was ID there. Great, and edit. Now let's save it. Let's open up here the priority table. I think we have to refresh it. Cool, here we go. We see this user ID column and here we have this priority user ID foreign key constraint. Great. With that being said, we added all the foreign keys that we needed. We understood one-to-many and many-to-one relationship. However, there are 2 other relationships left, one-to-one and many-to-many. We are going to look at these 2 relationships in the next lesson since we have to add more tables in our database. So see you in the next lesson.